My name is Jodie Evans. I'm the co-founder of Code Pink, Women for Peace. And Code Pink started as a push against the resolution to have a preemptive strike on an innocent country out of the United States. And Bush was frightening the American people with Code Orange and Code Red and Code Yellow, and we called Code Pink for Peace. And what we do is we work to end war and militarism and bring the money home to the needs of our communities. We've done our goal is to be nonviolent, so all of our actions have that at the core. But one of my favorite was an action against Congressman Ackerman, who had a bill that he was pushing through Congress that would have been an act of war on Iran. And we had done hunger strikes in his office, we had tried to get his attention. And a lot of what we try to do with Code Pink is that when you come up against something head on, it tends to resist. So we try to use humor, love, creativity, costumes, and definitely the color pink, which opens people's hearts. And so one morning we put together dinghies and little rowboats, and it happened that the resolution of Ackerman was to create a blockade of the Persian Gulf around Iran. We found out that he lived on a boat in Washington, D.C. So we did a blockade of his boat, but a very disarming blockade with little flags that had peace signs, little hats with peace signs, in our pink, and we blockaded his boat. And he got up and he was howling. He was laughing so hard. He spent a half an hour with us. Now, we'd been working on this campaign for 6 months, and he wouldn't give us the time of day. He listened to us. And he said, come back to my office at 2 because we had students from Iran, and we said they can tell you firsthand what this would mean inside of Iran. At 2 o'clock he met with them, and that resolution died and has never reappeared. And so we say that when we're disarming, when we use humor, when we connect to the person from love instead of hate, and when we don't see them as the problem but the structure of the problem, that we're create more openness for change to actually happen. So we have watched, and I have to say that I'm ashamed to be from the United States, and I apologize for that, but we have watched the investment in militarism, the increase in weaponry globally, increase the violence against women. And what we know is that the more violence, the more weaponry, the more women will be paying the price. Not only the price of losing their children, not only the price of losing their life, but being actually that rape against women is used as a tool of war. And this is just untenable. And it really starts from the top, from where countries big like the United States decide that they can control the world with weaponry. They decide that if you throw enough money at it and they throw enough violence at it, you can bring the thing that isn't behaving as it should for your needs and the corporate needs of your country, that that you think that you can control that. And instead what you do is unleash a level of violence at a very local, very community level as a backlash. And as we know, the inequality of power is what really causes all the problems of injustice globally. And that inequality of power, that capacity to spend in the United States right now is 53% on a tax dollar that is spent on war and violence. We spend more money in the United States on war and violence than every country in the world combined. When you have that happening from like the Empire of the United States, then how, as you move down the stages of disempowerment, are those men going to behave? And it's really a way of just taking disempowerment and making everyone feel it. That, what I call the imbalance of power that is felt by everyone then. That we've created such an imbalance of power in economically, in the level of violence that can be perpetrated on each other, that place of discomfort of our own disempowerment is played out on women. And so what we need to do is remember the values of nonviolence. That against this violence, to stand in nonviolence from the passion of our heart and know that it is a system that we're caught in that has been going on for too long, and that we have to hold those accountable for that violence that are being violent. And it starts with definitely the government of the United States, but it goes down to our communities, of what's happening in our community. So we can't look just at the United States and say we have to change that government, but we have to look within our own communities and use our voices and tell our stories. We as women, if we tell the truth, we will shatter the world open. So many times what we find out is it's because the stories haven't been told, because the violence hasn't been named, hasn't been brought to the surface, and the costs haven't been discussed, that it continues to spread as the virus that it is. So, what we do at Code Pink is we call on all women to tell their truth, to share their stories. And one of the important pieces of that I know that I can talk about, just the linear path of it, is that when I went to Iraq right after we invaded in 2003, I met women in the military who talked about the rape they were experiencing, and they said, but you can't tell anybody. We'll tell you when we get home. And then we had a Code Pink retreat, and we invited many of these women that were now out of the military to our retreat. They were part of Iraq Vets Against the War, and they'd never been together, and they roomed together, and they shared their stories, and they found out they'd all been raped. And then we told the stories in the media, and at the Women's Media Center, we started publishing their stories. And then we helped share the stories, and then Eve Ensler did a vagina monologue around it that again started to spread the story. And then a filmmaker found it, and now we have Invisible War. And all this time we are working to try to change the laws, and we're trying to get members of Congress to pay attention, but they won't. But when that film got out, and when that inspired other women's courage to tell the story to each other, what we hear now inside of the military, where no one would pay attention to this issue, because the stories are public, because there's something you can't shy away from, the men are coming out ashamed to be men, ashamed of their behavior, and finally the behavior is changing. So I can't encourage enough that it is up to us, the women who experience the violence, who know the cost of it, that we need to tell our stories, and we need to tell it to each other first. We need to empower each other to share our stories. We need to listen to each other's stories. We need to have the courage to hold these stories and then to share them so that we can all change this violent culture together.